Ira, this offensive line is pure ass. They can't block anybody. I would fire Alex Atkins yesterday. This group has regressed. There's no real development. He hasn't produced a single pro. This is nonsense. And at this point, if you're going to fire anybody in season, I would think he's the top candidate.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's the only candidate you really could that would make sense if you're going to do it in season. But then you ask yourself, what are you doing? Are you doing it just as to send a message to your team that you're not going to put up with nonsense? Or are you sending a message to the fan base?
Probably the latter. Yeah.
Yeah. Or are you going to get? Is anything going to be better? I mean, I get that the fan base wants somebody to go down for this. That's going to happen. Probably several people at some point are going to go down for this, but I don't know that it makes you better in these last 5 weeks. So that's the question. I don't know. I'm not telling people they shouldn't do it. And if he did do it, I wouldn't argue against it. I'm just not 100% sure what it.
Oh, I agree that within a season, it is very rare that actually firing, like Oklahoma fired their OC yesterday. Utah's OC resigned, I'm sure, because he was asked to.
If they're play callers, I get it. But Alex Atkins isn't the play caller.
No, I agree. I was going to make a different point. I agree with you. I think a lot of times firing a coach in season, it doesn't do you any good in the now. It doesn't. It's a message sender. If you've got somebody on staff who can play that role, meaning you don't put extra burden or work on your own self by firing that person, you might want to, in this era of college football, with the calendar sped up, begin the search a little early and look for an OC/offensive line coach or something of that ilk. Maybe you would do that. I don't know. But these are all things that I think a lot of people, like you said, if it's on the table, nobody's going to be shocked, and nobody would clutch their pearls and go, "Oh, I can't believe he did that," because this is as inept as you'll ever see.
Yeah, but the reality is, again, Mike Norvell is, one of the positives of Mike Norvell, I think, is also a negative, just like a lot of coaches. It's what your greatest strengths are sometimes. Your greatest weaknesses with Bobby Bowden is his loyalty, and then it turned around and hurt him. With Mike Norvell, I think he puts so much of this on him. Like, I think Mike Norvell used himself, like a lot of head coaches, as the personnel director, as the game planner, as the overall. I think Mike Norvell is not a delegator. This is his program. So when it's failing, as a good person, I think he wants to put a lot of the blame on himself. So my personal feeling is I don't think that he sees it as it's this guy's fault. I think he thinks it's his fault, but ultimately at the end of the day, he needs a better staff around him that he's going to listen to, because you can't have gotten into this situation. The only way you get into a situation like this is if you have a bunch of bad decisions and nobody challenges you on them. And that's how you get into the situation. But yeah, changes have to come. I just don't know when.
It's worth bringing up, and it's a good point. I had this discussion with a Nole yesterday, and we were talking about, like, how do you arrive at this place? And he said something very similar, and I agree with that. What you just said, what he said, and we were talking about this. It's like, it's because nobody who on that staff is walking in and telling Mike, that is a disastrous decision. You shouldn't do that.
Well, I mean, and listen, so whether it's consciously or subconsciously, he put the staff together. And sometimes people put a staff together like that,
so they don't get challenged.
Right. And so now I would argue that you're much better off having strong people around you, strong voices that you can argue with. And again, I don't want to relate everything back to Bobby Bowden's time, because it feels like 100 years ago. But one of the strengths of that staff when it was going right was you always heard the stories about Chuck Amato and Mark Richt and Mickey Andrews yelling at each other in meetings. And people hated Chuck Amato because he would always bring up the contrarian point of view. Well, what if this happens? Well, what if this happens? And he would, and it drove people crazy. But that makes you better. You need to have somebody, and maybe they have somebody like that. I just don't feel like we've seen any signs of it. And that's one more thing I think he needs to get, is just differing points of view to challenge him as he makes his decision.
You almost need an organizational guy. A guy who's maybe not an X's and O's guy in the field, somebody who's just taking a good hard look at the overall operation and has the what for to be able to, or the respect that it's been earned, garnered from Mike, where he could walk in and say, "Hey, can I talk to you, boss? I think we got some problems brewing." I think we got some real issues here as it pertains to this, and this. And even in the wake of 13-0 or 12-0 and 13-1, whatever you'd say, you could say, buddy, we kind of lucked out here, and this is why. And I think we've got to make some changes, real substantive changes right now to this, and this. And it would be something that Mike, at the very least, would take home with him and think about and contemplate because he respected the voice it came from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I think that's something every organization needs. Now, the challenge is if you bring somebody like that in now, midstream, then everybody else is going to feel like, this guy is the narc. But I would say that, again, as you're making changes going forward, I don't think it's about, as you make changes, it's not just about getting different people in these seats. It's about figuring out, okay, why did we get in this situation? Again, that's where, I think Norvell, he has to be honest with himself. And that's, I've seen a lot of people say they don't believe he'll make changes, he'll be too proud, whatever.
Oh, I think he will.
I think people are projecting that based on previous experiences. But I do hope he's honest with himself and realizes, he needs to be challenged more going forward.
Well, the look on his face seems to suggest he knows this is, without question, overused phrase on the day, unmitigated disaster. He knows what this is. He knows what the standard is. He knows his own standard and Florida State's historic standard. He knows there's no way you arrive at this sorry-ass place without catastrophic decisions being made along the way that were somehow masked for a variety of reasons. He has to, right? He's a smart guy. We both concede he's a smart guy. There's no way, like in any organization, if you arrived at this place of dysfunction, that you couldn't be laying in your bed at night staring at the ceiling saying, what did I do to screw this up so bad? How could you draw any other conclusion, right?
No, I think that's 100% true. And again, I've covered some coaches that in my career that I felt like looked to place blame on other people or felt like things weren't as bad as people thought. I think Mike Norvell thinks this is as bad or worse than anybody else thinks. I mean, I think he's devastated by what has happened, and he's trying to figure out how to get out of it. The problem is you have to wear these losses in the meantime. Like, you can't just say, you know what, let's come back next year. You got to and take these ass beatings every week. Until you can do something about it. And again, it would be one thing if he wasn't if he had an offensive coordinator play caller right now, yeah, man, you could easily fire him. But he is that guy right now. Now, I guess he could assign it to somebody else, but does anybody think that there's anybody on that staff that's going to magically push the right buttons with this offensive line and these receivers to get – I mean, it's they need an overhaul of that offense.